Did you know that at the age of 12, Benjamin Franklin was working 60 hours a week? And when he wasn't working, he was busy giving himself a self-education that would cause Harvard students to fail miserably. I have a few words to tell you, and I want you to let those words rummage through your heads. Treating a child like a child reinforces their childishness. What do you think about that? I personally think it's true, and I've had personal experience proving it. Have you ever heard an adult talk to a child? Almost always, they stoop down to the child's level to talk to them. They'll be like, hey kid, how you doing, man? Hey, how you doing? And in the tone of their voices, in the demeanor of their speaking, and in the actions they do, they've literally sacrificed their adulthood to come down to the level of the child, thinking that if I remain an adult talking to this child, that is somehow disrespectful or not exciting enough or boring or some kind of outcome like that. And hey, I guess in a world where most children are used to adults talking to them like the adult is some kind of a giant child, I guess it probably would be boring, wouldn't it? Because a lot of times, and I've had personal experience with this, a few years ago, before I had my radical self-improvement change, I would stoop down to the level of children when children were speaking to me. So, for example, let's say I'm at someone's house, they have a child, and the child comes up to me, he's like, hey, come to my room, come look at all my toys, 2, 3, 4, 5-year-old child, more or less. And of course, me feeling guilty, I would just go. I may have been busy on a freaking business call, discussing stock market prices or something. But I would drop everything because, hey, if you don't stoop down to the level of a child, you're mean, right? And guess what would happen when I stooped down to the level of a child? The child wouldn't respect you. So let's say you were done looking at the toys, you went back to the other room, and you started going onto your phone, having business conversations, busy with certain things you were busy with. The child wouldn't respect you. The child is now spoiled to think that you are going to do whatever they want you to do. Which is, of course, not a good precedent to set. Because now their whole respect of you, their whole interaction with you, is predicated on whether or not you do whatever they want you to do, which is totally unfair. This idea that we have to do whatever our children want us to do for them at the sacrifice of our own individual lives, I have a lot of questions about that. And I think a lot of parents sacrifice themselves because they're afraid that they're not going to be as attentive a parent as their neighbor's parents are to their own children. God forbid your child thinks the neighbor's parents are better parents because the neighbor's parents buy their children more crappy toys, pay more attention to the child, when ironically, some of the best things you could ever do for a child is to leave them alone and let them develop some individuality, emotional independence, So what happened? In recent years, I've changed. Now, when a child comes up to me and says, hey, come look at my toys, come play this, that, and I'm busy and I don't want to do it, I just very simply, straightforwardly say, now I'm doing something. What is the child's reaction? They might persist 1 or 2 more times. I'll tell them, look, now I'm doing something. It doesn't take more than 1, 2, maybe even 3 repeats. A lot of times it happens the first time. They leave me the fuck alone. They leave me the fuck alone. Because, you see, children naturally respect adults because they can see that, one, they're taller. That's one reason to respect someone, right? They're freaking 3 times as big as you are. But also because a lot of children think of parents as like gods. You know, the parents are the ones with all the freedoms. The parents are the ones with all the responsibilities. The parents are the ones who can go off and do whatever they want, whereas the child does not have all these advantages. So children naturally have a respect for parents, for older people, but when an older person sacrifices their autonomy, their greatness as grown, experienced individuals by stooping down to the level of a child, what happens is a child no longer respects you. In fact, now you've given the child full permission to keep acting like a child. And you know, we reinforce childishness in children on so many levels. Not just in how we interact with them, but how we dress them. How many children from age 1 going up to age 8 even, or more, do parents dress their children up in like really colorful, childish, like Sesame Street outfits? Like a 2-year-old is in like a giant Big Bird freaking baby outfit. Why are we cladding our children in these silly daycare, these fundamental little petty, distractive colors and you know, cartoon characters, and we're reinforcing their childishness by treating them like children? And people say, oh no, but children like that. Children are children and children like being children. Well, that assumes that being a child means that children somehow by default like cartoons, that children somehow by default like distraction, that children somehow by default like fantasy and delusion, that they just want to live in a freaking fantasy land. When I would say, to the contrary, children want to grow up. They want to have individuality. They want to have their own paths and purposes in life. They want to be active people cultivating their destinies. But when we remove and rip out their individuality, their destinies, their own independence by, you know, sugarcoating and dousing them in cartoons, all these fairy tales, Santa Claus, mindless consumerism, you know, the height of their year every year is, you know, Santa Claus buying them a bunch of crap they saw on TV during the fucking commercial break. And then we're like, God, kids are such spoiled assholes. Kids are so annoying. God, we gotta beat kids into submission. We gotta discipline kids into submission. We gotta put kids in school, you know, for the first 18 years of their lives so they learn some discipline. Well, I think discipline is a delusion, actually. Little quick side note. You don't need discipline to do things you love. Think about it. You ever heard the old saying, no alarm clock needed, my passion wakes me up? You don't really need discipline to do things you love. Discipline, like laziness, is a myth, a delusion. You don't really need discipline if you want to do what you're doing with your life. You only really need discipline if you hate what you do and have to fucking develop discipline to cultivate the amount of consistency to achieve things that you don't want to fucking achieve. Things you don't like doing. I mean, just come on. Do you think this cat gives a fuck about anything right now? Look at her. Do you think she gives a fuck? This bitch is doing exactly what she wants to do. God, this bitch is incredible. I love this bitch. That's my cat. All right. And, you know, it's ironic. You know, some would say, oh, yeah, but the cat, you know, you take care of her. Of course, it's just going to sit around and do nothing. Well, actually, you know, even survival, I would say, naturally is something we would do without discipline, you know? If you're starving in the wild, it doesn't take discipline to get up and go hunt for food. You know, all this discipline, all the things like laziness, these are modern day luxuries, man. These are luxuries of living in a world where we have no connection to our own individuality. Our lives, beginning in school, beginning at home really, and then going into school, everything we do is for somebody else's agenda. That's what school is. School isn't for you. It's for the corporate overlords who want to make sure that you are sufficiently trained through 18 years of school so that they can pluck you out of high school and college to replace all their retiring workers into the new generation of the workforce. That's not your dream. That's not your destiny. You're a human resource placed into these school system factories, all with the entire purpose of your life leading up to working for somebody else's dream, somebody else's destiny. That's why children are unmotivated. That's why children have to be diagnosed and given ADHD medication to focus. Because it's not their own dream, it's not their own destiny, so naturally they don't want to focus on it. So we got to drug them up with Ritalin, which is a dopamine reuptake inhibitor. It's chemically related to, cocaine. We got to turn our children into crackheads in order to get them to focus on someone else's destiny. So we reinforce childishness in children. And we've forgotten that, Benjamin Franklin, as I started this video off with, Benjamin Franklin, at the age of 12, was working 60 hours a week, cultivating his own destiny, and would write his autobiography later years in life because he lived a life he loved. Some people might say, oh, what, you want to go back to child slave labor, where there were no child labor laws? Well, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And if you use that, well, you need to really reconsider your capacity to think, because that's really ignorant on your part. Okay, just because something came from the past doesn't mean it's bad. Okay, bananas have existed throughout history. Just because I like eating bananas and think people should start eating healthier, like fresh fruits that have existed since the beginning of fucking time, doesn't mean I support all the bad things from the past. Fuck. Sorry. Doesn't mean I support all the bad things from the past, like slavery and fucking, beheadings and stoning of women in the public square for being witches. So that's a stupid argument. No. There is a great deal of value and just passion and excitement found in children reclaiming their individuality and their independence at an early age. We have prolonged childishness, okay? Treating a child like a child reinforces their childishness. We have prolonged childishness because a lot of parents like having children who are children for a long time, because a lot of parents are emotionally dependent. Children are like those things that always loved them. The things, a lot of people, we don't find love from other human beings, other adults, because they're so unreliable. People are backstabbing, self-interest driven assholes, right? But when we have a kid, finally, it's this beautiful little creature that loves us no matter what, and respects us, and does what we tell it to do. And we want it to be a child for as long as possible, because it's so amazing to finally get love from somebody in this world of backstabbing betrayal. So we want our children to be children as long as possible. So we dress them up in little Big Bird outfits, and we think it's cute to dress them up like, freaking clowns, essentially, literally clowns. And all that really ends up doing is reinforcing their childishness for the self-interest of the parent, which is incredibly evil. To take another individual point of consciousness in your child, and to take that, and at an early vulnerable age when they can't know any better, literally train the poor child to be emotionally codependent on you back. So we want children to be children as long as possible, You're not mature until you're 18. And then we wonder why there's a pedophilia problem in the world. Then we wonder why there's like 12 seasons of To Catch a Predator on fucking Dateline. Well, because people are children longer than we've ever been. Evolutionarily speaking, our bodies are primed and ready for sexual interaction from the age of fucking 11, 12, sometimes 9. Some women go into puberty and start having their period as early as 9 years old. Evolutionarily speaking, as far as nature's concerned, human beings are of a mature level much earlier than society allows for maturity. Society says you're not mature, you're not an adult until you're 18. And of course that number's outdated. They're going to have to raise that up to 22, 25. Because the kids are being kids longer than ever before. So on one level, we have evolution and our biology saying you should be mature and ready at the age 9, 10, 11, 12. But society, which loves to fucking make children as long as possible, saying you're not an adult until you're 18. So we have all these biological sexual impulses at an earlier age, when puberty starts at 11, 12, earlier sometimes. Then we have society saying you can't have sex until you're 18. More or less. So it's funny. It's bizarre. But, you know, Benjamin Franklin, you know, I mean, there is great power and potency, and we want children to be children longer than they have to be. We have prolonged childhood artificially, and the result of that is just, and really, I would even say that we are children our whole lives. If you're not living your life, if you're not living your destiny, you're still a child, in my opinion, to a degree. You're like a little child who has getting their hand held, even if you get a job, even if you're 30 years old with your own kids. So many parents nowadays are still fucking children themselves at the age of 30, 35. Distracted with their sports. They think that sports is the be-all, end-all purpose of their lives. They get, you know, wrapped up in the fucking, the corporate culture. They care about the silliest fucking things. Every now and again, some stupid dance craze comes along, and that's like the epitome of their lives. They've totally sacrificed their own control over their lives because, hey, your whole life you've been just living somebody else's dream. The corporate dream of somebody else who's making a bunch of money off your back. So we have definitely prolonged childishness. Childhood has been artificially prolonged. And I think it's a tragedy because it really is ruining individuals' lives because we end up being emotionally sucked in and latched onto by our parents. You know? There used to be a time when people were just fucking individuals. And there wasn't all this emotional codependency. Individuals would just leave the nest. Literally, humans would just leave the fucking nest. And we would go off and do things on our own. And there wasn't all this, you know, emotional codependency and latching on that we see today. And I want to return to that personally. I personally want to return to that.